How dare you feel pride in what we accomplished? You had nothing to do with it. You weren't there when Mama worked herself to exhaustion. You weren't there when we went to bed hungry. You weren't there when we wore clothes with holes in them to school. You weren't there when Mama died and we had to figure out how to survive on our own. Emma, Lily, and Grace Parker, the three women who had built a tech empire from nothing and become three of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. Their story was legendary. Their success was astronomical, and their father, everyone knew, had abandoned them before they were even a day old. But our story doesn't begin here. In this moment of desperate seeking, it begins 28 years ago, in a different kind of rain, in a different kind of darkness, where a young man's fear would set in motion a tragedy that would echo through the decades. The hospital walls were painted a fading yellow that might have been cheerful once, but now just looked tired and sad. The fluorescent lights flickered with an irregular rhythm, buzzing like dying insects. David Miller sat on a hard plastic chair outside the delivery room, his work boots leaving small piles of dried cement dust on the worn linoleum floor. His hands, rough and scarred from laying bricks in the hot sun, trembled as he held his head. He was 23 years old, but he felt ancient. Old with worry, old with fear, old with the weight of responsibilities he didn't know how to carry. David had been working since he was 14, ever since his own father had died, and left him to care for his sick mother. He had dropped out of school, learned to lay bricks, and worked 12-hour days under the burning sun. When his mother passed 2 years ago, he thought maybe, finally, he could breathe. Maybe he could build a life. Then he met Sarah. Sarah Collins was a waitress at the diner where David ate his lunch every day. She had a smile that could light up the darkest room and a laugh that sounded like music. She was kind to everyone, remembered their orders, asked about their days. When she talked to David, he felt like he mattered, like he was more than just another poor laborer covered in dust and sweat. They fell in love the way young people do, quickly, completely, without thinking about consequences. 6 months after they met, they were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. 3 months after that, Sarah told him she was pregnant. David had been terrified, but also excited. A baby. His baby. He would work harder, take extra jobs, do whatever it took. He would be a better father than his own had been. He would make sure his child never went hungry, never felt the cold bite of poverty the way he had. But tonight, as he sat outside that delivery room, Sarah's screams echoing through the hallway. A nurse had pulled him aside with a concerned look. "Mr. Miller," she had said gently, "the doctor wants you to know that your wife is carrying triplets. We didn't catch it in the earlier examinations because they were positioned in a way that, well, it doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're going to be the father of 3 babies. Probably within the hour." David's world had tilted on its axis. 3. The word kept echoing in his mind like a death sentence. 3 babies, 3 mouths to feed, 3 bodies to clothe, 3 futures to provide for. He made $8 an hour laying bricks. On a good month, he brought home maybe $1,200. Their rent was $400. Food was another $300. Utilities, transportation, everything else. They were already barely surviving on his income alone. How would they manage with 3 babies? The math was simple and brutal. They couldn't. Now, sitting in that chair, David felt like he was drowning. Every breath was difficult. Every heartbeat hurt. The walls seemed to be closing in on him, the flickering lights growing dimmer, the air growing thinner. The delivery room door opened. A nurse with kind eyes and gray hair smiled at him, completely unaware of the storm raging in his heart. "Congratulations, Mr. Miller. You have 3 beautiful, healthy baby girls. Your wife did wonderfully. She's asking for you." David stood up on legs that felt like they were made of water. 3 girls. 3 beautiful girls. The nurse's words should have filled him with joy, but all he felt was terror so profound it tasted like metal in his mouth. "Sir, would you like to see your daughters?" David nodded numbly and followed the nurse down the hallway. Each step felt like he was walking toward his own execution. She led him to a window looking into the nursery, and there they were, 3 tiny babies, wrapped in pink blankets, lying in clear plastic bassinets arranged in a row. They were so small, so perfect, so completely helpless. Each one had a little card taped to her bassinet, Baby girl Miller A, baby girl Miller B, baby girl Miller C. They'll need names, the nurse said warmly. Have you and your wife decided? David couldn't speak. He stared at those 3 tiny faces, and something inside his chest cracked open. Love flooded through him. Pure, overwhelming, terrifying love. He loved them. God help him. He already loved them so much it hurt. And that was exactly why he couldn't stay. The nurse pointed to the door at the end of the hall. Your wife is in room 304. She's tired, but she's doing well. Go on. They're waiting for you. David turned toward room 304. Through the small window in the door, he could see Sarah propped up on pillows, her face pale and exhausted but glowing with happiness. One of the babies was in her arms. She was looking down at their daughter with such pure love that David felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She looked up, sensing someone at the door. Her eyes met his. She smiled, that beautiful, trusting smile that had made him fall in love with her. She lifted her free hand, beckoning him to come in, to meet their daughters, to begin their life as a family. David stood frozen. He saw their future flash before his eyes with terrible clarity. He saw Sarah working herself to exhaustion, saw the babies crying from hunger, saw them growing up in poverty worse than anything he had experienced. He saw himself failing them over and over, unable to provide even the most basic necessities. He saw his daughters suffering because of his inadequacy. He couldn't do it. He couldn't watch them suffer. He couldn't be the reason they went hungry. The rational part of his brain screamed at him that this was wrong, that running away would only make things worse, that they needed him. But fear is not rational. Terror is not logical. And David Miller was too young, too scared, and too broken to think clearly. He turned away from room 304, away from Sarah's trusting smile, away from his 3 daughters who would never know their father's face. He walked past the nurse's station, past the waiting area, past the gift shop with its cheerful balloons and teddy bears. He pushed through the hospital's front doors into the cold night air, and he kept walking. With every step, shame burned in his chest like acid. Tears streamed down his face. He told himself he was doing the right thing. He told himself they would be better off without him dragging them down. He told himself that Sarah was smart and capable and would find a way. He told himself 1,000 lies to justify the truth, that he was a coward and he was running away. By the time he reached the bus station on the edge of town, dawn was breaking. David bought a one-way ticket to a city 3 states away, somewhere he had never been, somewhere no one knew his name. As the bus pulled away, he looked back at the town where his wife and daughters slept, unaware that he was already gone. He pressed his hand against the window, a gesture that would echo 28 years later, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The bus drove on. David Miller disappeared into his new life, and behind him, in room 304, Sarah woke from exhausted sleep to find nurses instead of her husband, and the first crack appeared in her heart that would never fully heal. Sarah named them Emma, Lily, and Grace. Emma, because it meant whole or universal. And Sarah wanted her to know she was complete exactly as she was. Lily, because it meant pure, and Sarah saw infinite possibility in that tiny face. Grace, because it meant favor and blessing, and despite everything, Sarah knew her daughters were blessings. When the nurses told her that David had left during the night, Sarah didn't cry. Not then. She couldn't afford to. She had 3 babies who needed her, and tears were a luxury she couldn't spare. The hospital social worker came to see her that afternoon. A middle-aged woman with sympathetic eyes and a folder full of forms. "Mrs. Miller, I need to talk to you about your situation. With your husband gone and 3 newborns, you're going to need help. We have programs." "I don't need charity," Sarah said quietly, holding Lily while Emma and Grace slept in their bassinets beside her bed. "I need a job. I need affordable childcare. I need an apartment. Can your programs help with that?" The social worker sighed. "There are resources, but Mrs. Miller, you need to be realistic. 3 infants, no partner, no family support from what you've told me. This is going to be incredibly difficult." "Difficult is not impossible," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I'll find a way." And she did. Sarah moved into a one-room apartment in the poorest part of town. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and cockroaches scattered when she turned on the lights. But the rent was $200 a month, and the landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, who had raised 6 children of her own, let her pay late if necessary. She found a woman named Betty who ran an unlicensed daycare out of her apartment. Betty charged $5 a day per child, $15 total, which was barely less than Sarah would make in a day. But it was care, and Betty was kind. Sarah got a job cleaning houses. She worked for a company that sent her to different homes every day. She scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, dusted furniture, cleaned windows. The work destroyed her hands and back, but it paid $7 an hour. And if she worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, she could make just enough, just barely enough. The girls grew. Emma started walking first, then helped her sisters learn. Lily spoke first, full sentences before she was 2. Grace was the fighter, the one who wouldn't sleep, wouldn't give up, wouldn't accept no for any reason. They shared one bed, a double mattress on the floor that Sarah had bought at a thrift store. Sarah would lie in the middle with 3 little girls curled around her like puppies, and she would whisper to them in the darkness, "You are brilliant. You are capable. You are loved. Education is your way out of this, my darlings. Study hard. Learn everything. Read everything. Ask questions. Never stop learning. That's how you build a better life." Even as toddlers, they somehow understood. When other children were playing with toys, the triplets were at the library with their mother, each one carefully turning the pages of picture books, absorbing stories like they were food. Money was always tight. For some months, Sarah had to choose between electricity and food. She always chose food. They ate a lot of rice and beans, a lot of oatmeal, a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, but they never went to bed hungry, even if it meant Sarah did. The girls never had new clothes. They wore donations from Mrs. Chen's daughter or items Sarah found at thrift stores. They shared one backpack for school. They took turns wearing the least worn shoes. But they went to school clean, with their hair combed, with packed lunches Sarah made at 5 in the morning. When they were 7, Sarah got a second job. She worked cleaning houses from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, picked up the girls from school, made sure they did their homework, made dinner, put them to bed, and then went to work washing dishes at a restaurant from 9 at night until 2 in the morning. She slept from 3 until 5:30, then started again. "Mama, you look so tired," Emma said one morning, her young face creased with worry. "I'm fine, baby," Sarah smiled, though dark circles ringed her eyes and her hands shook from exhaustion. "You just focus on your schoolwork. That's all I need from you." The girls were brilliant, all 3 of them. Their teachers noticed immediately. They devoured books, solved math problems that challenged children twice their age, asked questions that made their teachers think. They won every spelling bee, every science fair, every academic competition their school held, but brilliance doesn't pay bills. And Sarah was drowning. When the girls were 10, Sarah developed a cough. She ignored it, as she ignored all her body's protests. She couldn't afford to be sick. Sick meant missing work. Missing work meant no money. No money meant no food, no rent, no survival. The cough got worse. Soon she was coughing so hard she would double over, gripping the edge of the sink, blood speckling her handkerchief. She hid it from her daughters, washing the handkerchiefs in secret, forcing smiles when they looked at her with worried eyes. "Mama, please go to the doctor," Lily begged one night, having heard her coughing through the thin walls. "I will, honey," Sarah lied. "I will soon. It's just a cold. Nothing to worry about." But it wasn't a cold. It was pneumonia that her exhausted, malnourished body couldn't fight. By the time she finally collapsed at work and was taken to the emergency room, it was already in both lungs. The doctor was blunt. "Mrs. Miller, your body is shutting down. You've worked yourself to the point of complete exhaustion. You're malnourished. You're severely anemic. You need rest, proper nutrition, medication, and time to heal. At least 6 weeks." Sarah laughed, though it turned into a coughing fit. "Doctor, I have 3 daughters to feed. I don't have 6 weeks. I don't have 6 days. I need to get back to work. If you don't rest, you'll die," the doctor said quietly. Is that what you want your daughters to remember? That you worked yourself to death? Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is that they eat, that they have a roof over their heads, that they stay in school. I'll rest when they're grown. I'll rest when they're safe." She was back at work 3 days later, so weak she could barely stand. But she stood anyway, because that's what mothers do. They stand when they want to fall. They work when they need to rest. They sacrifice everything, including themselves, for their children. The girls noticed, though. They were too smart not to. They started doing more around the apartment, cooking simple meals, cleaning, taking care of each other. Emma became the second mother, making sure Lily and Grace ate breakfast, getting them ready for school. Lily handled all the paperwork, bills, and anything requiring careful reading. Grace became the negotiator, fierce and protective, arguing with landlords and bill collectors on behalf of her mother. They were children being forced to grow up too fast, carrying burdens no child should carry. But they never complained. They had learned from their mother, you don't complain, you survive. One night, when they were 12, the girls stayed up late, whispering in their shared bed, while Sarah worked her night shift. "We have to do something," Emma said. "Mama is killing herself for us." "What can we do?" Grace asked. "We're just kids." "We study," Lily said firmly. "We study harder than anyone has ever studied. We win scholarships. We get into good schools. We make something of ourselves so that Mama can finally rest. That's what we can do." It became their mission. While other children played video games or watched TV or hung out with friends, the triplets studied. They stayed at the library until closing time. They did extra credit assignments. They read textbooks years ahead of their grade level. They taught each other, pushed each other, refused to let each other slack off even for a moment. When they were 14, Lily discovered computer programming. The school had gotten new computers through a grant, and Lily spent every lunch period, every free moment, learning to code. She taught herself from online tutorials and library books. And then she taught her sisters. Soon, all 3 of them were coding, creating simple programs, building basic websites. They started offering their services to small businesses in the neighborhood. $50 for a simple website, which they split 3 ways and gave to their mother to help with bills. Sarah cried when they handed her that first $150. "My brilliant girls," she whispered, holding them tight. "I'm so proud of you." They made more websites. They got better. They charged more. By the time they were 16, they were making several $100s a month, enough that Sarah could cut back to just one job. For the first time in years, she slept more than 4 hours a night. Color returned to her face. The cough, while never fully gone, improved. "We're going to take care of you, Mama," Grace promised. "Just like you've taken care of us." Sarah smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. She knew something her daughters didn't yet know, that the damage to her body was already done. Those years of malnutrition, exhaustion, and untreated illness had taken a toll that couldn't be undone. She had maybe 2 more years, if she was lucky. But she didn't tell her girls that. She let them hope. She let them dream, because hope and dreams were the only inheritance she had to give them. Sarah collapsed during the girls' junior year of high school. One moment she was cooking dinner, the next she was on the floor, unconscious. Her body finally giving up after years of pushing far beyond its limits. Emma found her and called 911. The ambulance came. The doctors ran tests. The diagnosis was brutal. Heart failure, chronic kidney disease, liver damage, and the pneumonia had returned, this time with a vengeance. "How long?" Sarah asked the doctor, her voice steady. "With treatment, maybe 6 months. Without it." The doctor trailed off. "I can't afford treatment," Sarah said simply. "So give me your best guess. Without treatment, how long?" 3 months. Maybe 4. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. She had felt her body failing for a while now. "Don't tell my daughters how bad it is. Let them think I'm just sick, that I'll get better." But the girls weren't fooled. They saw the machines, the medications, the way the doctors looked at their mother with pity. They understood. Sarah came home from the hospital but spent most of her time in bed. The girls took care of everything now. Cooking, cleaning, working their website business to pay bills, and taking turns sitting with their mother, holding her hand, reading to her. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered one night, when all three girls were curled up around her on the bed, the way they used to when they were small. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you a better life. I'm sorry you had to grow up so fast. I'm sorry you had to struggle so much." "Don't you dare apologize," Emma said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "You gave us everything. You gave us life, love, education, determination. You taught us to be strong. You taught us to survive. You gave us everything that matters. I'm just sorry I won't get to see what you become," Sarah said softly, "but I know you're going to be extraordinary. All three of you. Promise me you'll take care of each other. Promise me you'll stick together. Promise me you'll never give up on your dreams." "We promise, Mama," they said in unison, their voices breaking. "And promise me one more thing," Sarah said, her voice growing weaker. "Promise me you won't let bitterness consume you. Your father, what he did was wrong. Unforgivable, maybe. But don't let that pain define you. Build something beautiful from this pain. Help others. Make the world better." That's the best revenge, living a life so full of purpose and love that his absence becomes irrelevant. They promised, though they didn't know if they could keep that last promise. How could they not be bitter? How could they not hate the man who had abandoned them, whose cowardice had forced their mother to work herself to death? Sarah died on a Tuesday evening in late spring. The girls were all there, holding her hands, telling her they loved her, thanking her for everything. Her last words were barely a whisper. "Stay together. Love each other. Make me proud." And then she was gone. The girls were 17 years old and orphans. They had $400 in the bank, a month's worth of rent paid, and nothing else. No family, no support system, no safety net.